Well, yesterday was a really big day. We moved the blue car from over by my desk to up here on a lift. So I've started in by cutting out some of the e-brake stuff from the center console and the tunnel, as well as I removed the transmission mount. So because the transmission has been raised, I had to redesign the center console. I need to reposition the emergency brake, and I need to modify this. This will also give me the opportunity to fabricate this differently, so that way we can actually fit a 3-inch exhaust past the transmission, because before this was actually inhibitive. See, I made a couple of markings up here. We're still going to put the e-brake mount in this area, but it's going to move back 1 inch. This was mounted, as you can see, from here to here. It was crooked. We're going to mount this flat, but I'm not going to install any of that stuff until the center console piece is in, but I will be working on the transmission mount for sure for now. Made a good bit of progress yesterday. I went through all the trouble of cutting up the previous transmission mount and then redid the whole thing. Let's take a look under here. So the last one was more square on this end, and it hung a little bit lower as a result of which, so I wasn't going to be able to pass an exhaust through here, when obviously there's tons of room here for a 3-inch exhaust. That's great. This also is now mounted about 1 inch higher because I had realized that the position of the transmission on the top side was not high enough. So we maintained the same side plates, and then I just remade all this out of 2-inch angle iron. I ground down all of this stuff, and so this is where the e-brake was mounted before. This is where the poles were mounted, or the cables were mounted before. So I'm going to have to move that from here to here, and we're going to have to move this just down a little bit. I'm going to wait until I get my center console in here before we do that. So now let's go over here to the front. Today's adventures, we're going to be installing my monster oil cooler. So this is the Mishimoto MMOC DP LBK. The BK stands for the black, L stands for, it's the large one. They make a short one, which is about this long, medium one, which is about this long, and then the large one, which is this long. And we're going to mount it just like I typically do. Oil cooler is now installed. Check this guy out. So as per usual, made my right angle 90. Fuck. Oil cooler is now installed. We have our L bracket aluminum up here. It's 1/8 inch thick by 1 inch, so I just cut that to fit. Goes from the horn mounts from either side. So obviously you only have one horn over here, but there's a symmetric one over there. Got the large Mishimoto oil cooler dual pass. We have our Mad Fab Works perch back there. I've got 2 lines. This one's 29 inches. This one's 31 inches on the dot. We have 90s over here, and we have 60s back there. These are going to run right up against here. So now I'd like to take a moment to detail how we make sure we get as much air as possible through the condenser and through the radiator. So we're going to use an LRB speed under tray that helps with rigidity for the next step that we're going to do, as well as helps for serviceability in the future, because you can take off the center plate instead of having to take off the whole thing together. So this side piece here is going to leave us with a bit of an air gap. We have these 2 lines here. We'd like to seal up what we can. As you see, I already have a 1 by 1 inch foam piece here. We're going to do the same thing on the side plate. What I've already done is mounted that up, and then I roughly marked with a permanent marker where I need to run it through. So the lines are approximately here. So when I had it installed, I got in there on the backside with the permanent marker, and I just sort of scribbled. So from my scribble, we know that I'm going to put a little piece there, and I'm going to put a large piece here, and that'll help with all that. When we go to put on the other side, I'm not going to do foaming just yet because I haven't done my power steering, my power steering cooler lines yet. And then for the bottom piece, we're also going to do some along the bottom of the radiator, so that'll help a little bit more. So let's take care of this. Okay, time to get a good laugh. I made these lines a little bit, like maybe a 1/4 inch too close to LRB speed thing, so I bonked it to where I have a little more clearance there. The front piece, actually, it doesn't really matter as much because I don't put a screw through there. I put a screw through these 2. So to give me just a little extra clearance, I also wallow those holes out a little bit. And then you'll see my beautiful foam work over here. I don't know what this stuff is. This is a harder foam. I've got some that's like a softer foam, but this stuff, for some reason, it's like sticky all over the place. All right, so we're gonna bolt this guy back up and then see how everything seals up. I at least did a mock-up of holding it up here, and it looked like it went pretty decently. Looks like the hammering did okay at clearing up the space. Looks like I hammered a little bit too high. Oh, maybe a bit too low. This one clears no problem. That's actually contacting there. but I can just bend this now out of the way. That won't be too much of a problem. I'll just get in here, and now that this is secured, I can bend that. So the foam seems to have done a pretty good job. Let me get the light. Where the heck did my light go? Let's go find my light. There we go. So now if you look in here, you'll see very slim space right there. So if I really wanted to, I could double stack up the foam there. But I think once this gets pulled in, it'll help seal some of that up. All right. Now, let's take care of finishing the bend on that guy, and then we'll go ahead and install the other side and the bottom side as well. Just like to show off the LRB speed under tray here. So notice we have a slight bit of gap here. We usually cover this in tape, so we'll just take some tape, put it across this after we're done with assembly and everything. Next thing, we have the foam in there. As you'll notice, it's a lot more closed up. You'll notice there's a gap at the bottom. This is pretty typical as well, so we like to put foam across the bottom of this to seal that up. Any air that gets through there is not getting through your radiator nor through your condenser, and we'd like that. Then over here we have something like closer to 2 inches worth of gap. We're going to fill this up again after we do the power steering lines. But in the meanwhile, this is what the front end looks like. So now that I've finished all that other stuff, I'm going to worry about getting some of this intercooler piping taken care of. I have a 2-inch 90 down here that I've cut down, so it's really short. It's coming straight up out of the turbo, and because of the shielding positioning, I'm going to run it forward and then around. So in order to do that, I've cut it really short this way, and then I took another 90. This used to be a 90, as you see, and I've cut it short on one leg, and then we're going to run it, hold on, I have this marked, this way. This is the way we're doing it. So we're going to take this guy, and we're going to run it in here, so that way we can have it snake. It's hard for me to demonstrate. I had it taped together. Let's see, so it's going to run like that. Now as far as the length goes, I'm going to wait until I finish, get the welding done, so I'll get this thing welded together. Then we'll worry about how long I need that leg to be here, because we have the original piece that came with the EFR turbo kit that comes in the front. Tomorrow my new intercooler core comes in, and then we'll be able to see just how far this needs to go. Obviously, in the position it's in right now, I would need to cut either this down or the other piece down, but I want to be absolutely sure of how much I'm cutting down. So once the intercooler is taken care of, and in the front end, we'll worry about that. And then obviously I'll bead roll it as well. So switching over to this direction, let's see. I'm going to bring my light over here. So I'm looking at how I'm going to go about this. So I may need to cut this leg shorter so I can give myself a little more room here for radii as well as for my blow-off valve. But I've got this piece, I believe this is a 45, it's a 3-inch of course, and this looks like it's about what I'll need in order to get this thing to come straight out of the front. However, I'm anticipating having to come all the way over here, a little off, hold on, almost off screen. I'm anticipating having to come all the way over here in order to get to the end of the intercooler. So I also have my tight radius 90, as you'll see, as well as my regular radius 90. Obviously, we don't want to have to use tight radius for anything. This is a larger flow restriction than the fully, let's say the fully developed flow 90. But if space is an issue, then obviously you do what you gotta. So if I have to run this inward, then I will. I think it looks like I have this thing all cleared out. So in theory, I could run this in this direction if I have to. But then obviously this would have to come in, and I would have to use probably a 60 degree in order to get this back to here with this relocated up. Just narrating out my process of thought here, but I'm leaving these pieces out. Again, the intercooler comes tomorrow, and then we can dive in on doing all that stuff. So a lot of fun to be had very soon. All right, so we're back here in the home office, and I recently made all these changes to the car that caused me to need to redesign at least the lower shield for the center console. So I decided to go ahead and redesign the lower and the upper while taking the opportunity, and I'd like to show you the changes that I've made. So as I've shown you already, I've raised up the transmission 1 full inch. What that did is that made the little knuckle right here from the MGW shifter stick up, and I carved that away. But I ran into another problem when I designed my last shield, and that was that when I bolted the shield here, I attempted to bolt it to the front, and it sits on top of that knuckle. So you'll notice when I move the scan around, that is clearly sticking above the level here. Now obviously we're not looking at it perfectly straight on. Let's see if we can. There we go. So if we look at it from the perspective of where that shield was, this is now sticking up a significant amount above that. Before it was sticking up a little, but then when I decided to do the redesign, I said let's go ahead and just raise it up as much as it needs to be and redesign from there. I also noticed that I didn't really like how the e-brake sat, so I've redesigned as best I can around this, with bearing in mind that I would be moving it over a little bit to the left. Currently, in this scan, it was sitting in the position it was before I removed the mount, which, if you can notice, let's see, about right there, my scan is a little crooked in the screen here, but you can see this sits to the right-ish, so we're looking at maybe a 10 degree-ish deviation to the right, and when I redo this, it will be vertical, which will close up this gap over here, and you'll see what that does in a moment. Now, with all that in mind, I decided, let's go ahead and switch over to the other one. I decided I would go ahead, let's start by just taking this apart. So from this perspective, what I've done is I've moved the whole console assembly back a little bit so I could angle this down a little more. I didn't like how close it was on installation, so I've changed this from, I believe it was a 70 degree angle to now it is a 60-ish degree angle. And of course, like I said, I pushed the whole body of this back so I could lean that more. I also made this go all the way down instead of the chamfered cut, and you'll see why in just a moment. I am hiding a support under there. Now, due to the installation difficulties that I don't remember if I've shown in this video, but trying to get the e-brake support, trying to get around the e-brake with this piece, this cutout, was very difficult. So what I've done is I cut this whole section out and I made a removable piece, so I can install this by just sliding it in, sitting it down, and then I can put this plate on. Now this will cut away a good bit of structural integrity because we're not only missing a cutout here, but we're missing the giant cutout there. So the structure is missing. It's pretty much you only have this flat piece on the side and a little strip down the middle. So I made this to where it bolts in 4 places here and then 2 on top. So that'll add back to the structural rigidity here. And then on the underside of this as well, I took my idea from earlier with the trim ring and I'm putting that on the underside. So what I'll do is I'll take my material and I stick it down and then I will bolt it from the underside so that way the material looks like a normal e-brake boot. I found a sample at work, or a spare e-brake boot at work that I'll be using. There are no changes to this portion with the trim ring for the shifter. There's no changes to the switches either. So let's go ahead and get that out of the way. Let's see. The trim ring is this guy. The window switches are this guy. The upper shield, okay, before we remove the upper shield, let's move the shift boot. Before we move the upper shield, I want you to notice that right here I have holes and right here I have holes. So what I've done is I've taken and made 2 brackets. So this bracket will be riv nutted to the side, and then this bracket in the rear will use the existing 2 M6s in the back. So these will just go into the trans tunnel. I used 4 of them, of course, so that I would get rid of any twisting ability over here, and then these 2 sit flat on top of a surface, so that's perfectly fine. I also made sure to extend the whole body of it backwards enough just to cover that. And again, that's why I made this, like the new design, go around that so it hides that bracket entirely. Alright, we don't need to see those, and we don't need to see the rear console bracket either. What else do we need not to see? We don't need to see the front console bracket, I guess, either, huh? So this design became a little complex. I don't like how it necessarily came out 100% just in the complexity side of things. We'll have to do a little bit of welding. So allow me to demonstrate. On the other one, we did sort of a hot dog bun, if you will. We did a flat piece down the middle, a bend at the front, and then the 2 sides were folded upward. And that worked, except for where it contacted in the front. So if we look at this from the side view, let me make the console scan transparent. This is the portion where we were contacting. So I wanted to make sure we were like nowhere close to contacting. So if there's any movement in the transmission, any adjustments I need to make, this is not touching. So if we look back over here, you'll see the profile contacts down in the back on those existing holes I cut. This goes up, and I made it approximately level to go towards the front, and then we bend down and forward, and I'm going to make 2 new holes up front here, and I'm going to cut this section out. So we'll have just a little bit more room at the front of the transmission where the switch is. I'm going to bring this back to no transparency. Oh, or I hide it completely, right? There we go. All right, next thing is, that leaves the sides wide open. So I made a little piece right there. That's just going to be welded on. And same with the other side. The other side was a little more complex, so I made a piece that goes from the front, comes down the side, covers this up as best as possible. And normally I would go through the effort of cutting this down. However, the website Send Cut Send does not like it when you do bends near close contours. So I figured when this comes in, I'll just go ahead and cut that myself, because if I were to do the cut in the program, it would fuss at me for making that too close to the bend. And that should actually cover that up pretty well. I've also made sure there was room around the shifter, there's room around the e-brake, and all that should come together nicely. So hopefully everything comes in within this next week and I can move on. Well, my giant intercooler came in today. I have it set up right now. It's not resting on the LRB, it's not that strong. But we've got this thing sitting on top of a little board here, and my objective here is just to sit it in the correct position. I took off the front bar, obviously. That guy's off of there. I got some plans for that. We're going to try to maintain as much of that as possible. This guy, we're going to worry about doing our end tanks first. Once we have the end tanks welded on, we can worry about how our piping and our mounting is going to go. So with my giant end tank, I cut it down. This is the rest of it. And then this is the smaller end tank. This is the 2.5 inch one. This is exactly how it comes from Treadstone, and that fits exactly. And then the other one that was really long, that was the 3 inch. So I've cut down the internal baffle to here. I just cut it up to the next weld, and then obviously I whacked off the end of it, smoothed it off. So now I need to make a bottom plate for it. So I got my piece of aluminum over here. I'm just going to cut that up. I just put it on there and traced it. So we'll cut that up. That way we can just take care of welding it all in one go. That guy fits. I cut this down to length. So now these are ready to all get welded together. Now back over here, I checked. This little piece is structural up until here, so I figure I'll go ahead and cut something along these lines, and that'll give me a little more airflow. This is actually completely hollow all the way up here. So my objective is not to get rid of the whole plate, but at least give me some more airflow. This will give me more airflow through, obviously, the core. Now the other part that I'm thinking of doing is on this guy, I need to see how far I need to cut on the back side and on the front side, but I'd like to cut this to where I can weld in a plate on the back side at an angle so we can have some of the air coming in and up through the intercooler. My buddy Austin came and visited today to weld a bunch of this stuff up for me. So we got the 2-inch pipe put together. It fits exactly how I wanted it to. Look at that, nice and clear fitting in between all the components. I'll cut that down as soon as we figure out the intercooler mounting. Now that the intercooler is welded, look at that guy, that's a unit. Now that that's welded up, we can worry about how to mount this thing. Once this is mounted, we'll worry about the piping to the inlet, piping to the outlet, to the MAF, and then we can continue on. I was getting frustrated looking through all that mess of pipes that was over there, so I organized them all by size and then by bends. It'll be a little easier to go through all this. So let's take a look. I took the existing Fab 9 turbo pipe for this and I cut it down. I used my tight radius 90 over here, 2.5. Cut down that pipe a little bit. That goes from the turbo to the 2-inch. So that's nice, that's good. That fits all good over there. Just need to have this welded here. Now over to this side, tight radius 3-inch. It is tight fit. I mean, tight. Then I use, I believe this is a 45 here, and I got my angles. So this will just sweep up to here. I'm not going to cut the end off of this. I ended up cutting off enough of the straight here. We'll just weld straight to it here. And then I cut this down 2.5 inches, the silicone piece. Then I put an arrow on there because I kept forgetting what the orientation was. Now the blow-off valve. I had thought about putting it up here in the bumper, and I thought, no, that's not going to be loud enough. The hood louvers are there in the engine bay, so let's put it here. So we're going to end up welding it about right there, pretty much on the seam for this. So I spoke to my buddy about welding it, and he said, I will just partial weld this, then cut the hole, then weld this in over here. So I also went ahead and cut the line that's going to run to the blow-off. Oh, and I also put my fittings on it. I really don't like how deep they tapped that one, because look how deep the plug is in there. It's kind of scary. I felt like it was going to fall out of the backside. But then this one, it's like it didn't go in but a couple threads. Yeah, whatever. Today I thought I'd try my hand at getting this air intake sorted, and it looks like we're trying to put a round peg into a square hole, which gives me my idea of, I think I can make this work if I manage to make this square. So it's going to require probably some use of the brake press and some creativity, but I think I can make it work. The other alternative is I make something that's 3D printed. That can be very easy, but I don't know how much or how well it'll last, especially if it has to touch this radiator hose. That may not be the best of ideas. So we got on the parts from Send Cut Send, and I modified a couple of them. I sent them off for powder coating, and we got them back lickety split. So I'd like to show a couple of them. First, actually, let's start with the parts that are not coated yet. So the lower shield, as you saw in my 3D design, it came out. This is it. That was. Don't worry about that guy. Let's see. This guy came in. The fitment is really, really nice. We're going to need to weld that on there, and then I'll cut it up as I had mentioned previously. There was a little bar I made for this side. That comes in nicely. It has a very slight incline to it to compensate for the angle of this. That's the lower shield. Fits amazing. So after the welding and fitment and stuff, I drill the front 2 holes, and then I'll send this off for ceramic coating. So next thing was the brackets that hold up the transmission cover. So, the center console, man, get my words together. So this holds up the center console. I actually got 2 sets of these, so the other set's already in the car, powder coated, and I've already riv nutted them. They're just powder coated black, but these I was using for fit up in the meantime. Now the real fun part is this guy. So this came in, I just went ahead and got it in the same black that we were getting all the rest of our parts done in. Everything's been secured down now. This is actually bolted down. I used a bunch of lock nuts and all this stuff, and then I used riv nuts for the side plate for the emergency brake for ease, since this component will be installed after this is already installed in the car. All the rest of the stuff will be installed to the shield or to this big piece, and you'll take the whole thing out as one. The only problem I noticed is I guess I didn't compensate enough for the height of the riv nut here. So the riv nut height, you can barely see it there. It raised this up enough that these are not completely aligned, so I'm going to open up these holes just a little bit for them to fit. But they've already been riv nutted. Here, as you see, I've already put the plate in here. I lined both of these holes up when I made this part in SolidWorks, but unfortunately this hole was actually, I don't know, it looks like 2-3 millimeters back, so I got to open the hole up a little bit. This fits like perfection good. So I just need to put 2 holes here at the front, riv nut those, and then the welded piece will cover up this side and this side, just like we saw in the 3D model. So let's take that guy out of here. As I had mentioned, I already have this piece in here with the powder coating. This is the rear bracket. Can you see that? Can you see that? Yeah. This guy down here? Yeah, cool. Then I got this guy. The front bracket, I've already mounted up in here, as you see here. Oh, I already see a problem I'm going to have. Well, this is something else I need to fix later. There's no room to put a bolt on this. We may have to use flush bolts. Either way, so we're going to stick this guy on here. And my idea here was that when you stick this in here, actually the wires are tucked away, when you stick this on here, you line these 2 rear bolt holes up, and you can put the bolts in. And now, how do I know where I need to drill for the front mount? Well, the front mount, we'll be able to do 3D printed these 2 little spacers. So the little spacer is going to go under here, and then what I'll do is I will draw my line for outlining where that bracket needs to be, and then I'll take all this off, line it all up, and drill my holes. So that way all this lines up exactly how it needs to be. But this is how it's going to end up looking. Looks like everything's come out just about where I need it to be. I will need to open up a little bit on the e-brake hole here, just a little bit more. But now that this is in, we're able to weld in the bracket for the e-brake and position it exactly where it needs to fall for this. But again, the beauty of this piece is you're able to just unscrew this, take it off, without having to remove the whole center console to get that. Well, you can get the console on without having to battle with the e-brake assembly. So that'll make things a lot easier. So I'd like to take a second and point out how I figured out how to mount this guy. What I had done is I designed this thing to be completely hidden under that, but the problem is I don't have a method of picking the height on this guy. So what I'd done is in my 3D model, I figured out I needed 17 millimeters of height, and then I made these little blocks that are 17 millimeters tall. I stuck one here, I stuck one there. I put the piece on top, I assembled it, and then with a red marker, I painted around the edge as to what the position was. So that way I was able to come back, sit this on top of my little marker here, my marker mounts, my marker points, and then line it up, and I'll drill my holes exactly where I've punched now. So that should line everything up. But I thought it was a good idea to just print these little guys. Real simple, real quick, nothing fancy. So I'd seen online how some of these floor e-brake kits work for some of the old resto mods, and what they were doing is they had, you know, your top plate, and what you would do is you're supposed to put like a bottom plate on that sandwiches in this, and then you're supposed to just cut the excess. So I was going to do the same. So I found this. This is from an NC Miata, I believe. It's already got some perforations on it. So we'll just stick a couple of bolts through this on the back side, stick this plate on the bottom, secure it as such, cut any excess. That's kind of it. So let's see how it goes. Unfortunately, I don't have enough of the bolt size that I need. I use the slightly longer ones, but this came out looking awesome. There were perforations already on it, except for the front center, so I made a hole for that one. So now it looks like I just, like in the videos I've seen, we're just gonna run a razor around the edge of this to cut the excess off. Mainly, pretty much just this section, because this will have slight overlap to the center console. But this came out pretty awesome, and now I'll have a nice looking e-brake boot. All right, I'm really excited, so I went ahead and assembled everything. I also need to line up where the e-brake goes, as I had mentioned previously, so it's currently hung just by the leather here. So I need to get under the car and mark the position of this, but I wanted to at least demonstrate that I got all that stuff. So this now keys on, powers on, that gauge lights up. These are powered off of these little guys here, which are not hooked up yet, but they're obviously hooked up to that. But this came out really, really nicely. I'm very excited how this went out. So we'll now go under the car, line up where that plate needs to be welded to where this goes into the correct position. That's pretty much it for interior, aside from that lower shield being welded and ceramic coated. I am stoked. My muffler just came in, so this is by Total Flow, and it's their longer one. It's a 12-inch body, and I believe these are just 1-inch ends, so it's like 14 inches long, and it's a flow-through design, but it is a muffler. And this appears to fit in the spot that I need it to, so now we just need to finish the stuff on the front end so we can lift the car up and then weld some of the stuff on the underside. So Austin came out again on Friday, and he took care of a bunch of welding for us. Well, for me. So we got my center console shield welded up. We're going to send this guy off for ceramic coating after I take care of drilling those front two holes. Because now that it's welded, I can be sure of the positioning of the front two holes. I want to make sure there isn't going to be any sort of changes to the body or anything. Oh, and then, yeah, I do need to cut that back piece as well. While he was here, we went ahead and took care of changing out the V-band from Fab 9's downpipe, so I'll put this into the light so you can see. So the V-band that theirs comes with, it looks similar to that one, and the ones we use are from a company called Monkey Fab, and these are some really beefy ones. You'll notice they are a little bit larger on the flange size, but since they come in matched sets, I can't exactly just make the remainder of the exhaust without, you know, without having a matching flange. So these guys match together perfectly. We're going to make the rest of the exhaust with that. And also I went and had them put in a wideband position for me. So now I can have the OEM Lambda and then the wideband here. Because that port right there is useless since it's right up against the tunnel. Now let's peek over here at the other welding that was done. So this pipe is now welded to this one. There we go. And then these guys are all welded up, including my blow-off. Look at that guy. Nice tight fitment there. This thing is going to be screaming out the hood whenever it blows off. So we did some more underbody welding, but I'm going to get a couple more things together and then we'll go under there. Now we have the car in the air. You can see I got my plate welded in here, and I've got this plate tacked in place. The reason we did a tack here is because I'd like to put gusseting under it. However, I don't know exactly the angle I'll need it at. Now that we have this in the position it needs to be for the use of the center console and the position it's installed, I need to make a couple of small cuts up here for the sweep of the emergency brake, let's say armature, so because there's a slight contact on the top portion here. So I'm now going to uninstall the center console, mark where I need to cut for this, And then we'll see how that the center console shield fits, as well as see where I need to cut for this. Okay, spent the last hour or so taking care of this piece, the interior portions, and I've got all the center console stuff. I think about where I'd like it, and the e-brake pulls appropriately. I'll show you that in a second. What I've done is I've opened this hole up just a little bit that way. As I mentioned earlier, I had assumed these were in line, but I'd forgotten I didn't get them exactly perfect. So either way, open up that a little bit. I was off by just a touch here with the contact of the shifter, so I opened this up maybe 2 millimeters, just this portion here, that direction. I had contact here and here inside the car, so I just went ahead and opened up the center console a bit, and I've got my riv nuts ready. Oh, and I also obviously I cut that down, so this is now ready to go to ceramic coating. Next thing, I mentioned earlier in the video also that I made a miscalculation. This guy is exactly the width that fits inside of the center console piece, so that means there's no room for bolt heads. So what I did is I initially had designed these as M8 holes, so I was going to use M8s to mount it, but because of my mistake there, what I've done is I went ahead and got these countersunk M6s, and I went ahead and countersunk my holes, so now these will fit flush. I've also taken care of doing the riv nuts and such inside. So let's install these pieces and I'll show you what's going on. All right, back in the interior, as you'll see here. All right, back here in the interior, and as you'll see, I cut this little corner out. It was about another, I think, 1/4 inch or so, wherever that cut is. And then over here, same thing, where that cut was, I moved it over. This, I moved the cut all the way up, so now that knuckle is wide open here. And now I have an extra riv nut here, but these are the two that are being used. So let's go ahead and drop this guy in. This is difficult to do with one hand. There we go. Okay, so if we line those two bolt holes up, there we go. Nice tight enough fit. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to be putting tape over the edge here, you know, just your typical insulatory tape, and I'll put some foam around the edges as well. This section's going to have to remain open. I don't have a really good means of sealing this off, but at least we'll have a sealing over the rest of it. I've also thought maybe I'll put a piece of rubber around this, like a skirt, if you will, just a piece of rubber, tape it, glue it down on top, so that it sits over the edges and at least seals that up. Anything we kind of try and close up the air gap. Okay, next, the e-brake, because of this cut down here, it now pulls tight. So now the brakes are actually tied up. And this is the bottom position in which we had welded it. We had match welded it, I guess you could say. Now, this guy, it fits over the top here. You're supposed to bring all the wires together. And then all of those, they line up and they go in. I'm not doing that one-handed, but ta-da, you see how that goes. So that's pretty much it for the center console and the interior stuff. Now we're going to send this guy off to get ceramic coated and move on. I'm going to go ahead and bring this video to an end now, since I know I got a whole lot of content in it, and we got a little bit of a wait because I've got a couple of other projects I need to do that are not this car, as well as I need to wait on powder coating and such. So we'll continue in the next video. Thanks for watching.